Hi, excuse me. Hi, everybody who is joining now. We're going to wait just a minute or two to let a few more people join, and then we'll get started. For those of you who are joining as an attendee, you are automatically muted, so you won't be able to talk. But if you need anything, feel free to type it into the chat box at any time. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started. And if anybody wants to, if anybody joins later, they can just jump on. First, I wanted to say welcome to our webinar on the Microgrant Initiative, which is funded by the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. This program provides small grants ranging from $200 to $1,000 to JET participants working in Japan on the JET program. This allows you to fund projects that introduce American culture and English language to your students in your classrooms and to your local community. In this webinar, we're going to give a brief overview of the program and then take questions at the end. First, I want to introduce USJETAA, which is the United States Japan Exchange and Teaching Program Alumni Association. We administer the program. USJETAA is an independent 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports JET alumni and the JET alumni chapters. This is our only program for current JETs, though you may find some of our webinars relevant if you're thinking about what you want to do after you finish your JET contracts. Our alumni webinar series focuses on careers and professional development. Before we start, I'd like to let you know we're recording the webinar and we'll post it on our website and YouTube channel later for those who can't attend the webinar live. At the end of the webinar, we will have time for Q&A, so please hold your questions until the end or type them anytime using the chat or Q&A features. All right, first, I'd like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves in the order that you are on the screen.
Oh, me first. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace, and I'm the Education and Exchange Officer at the in the Public Affairs section at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. I know that doesn't really mean a whole lot, like what was education and exchanges. But basically what my team and I work on is we work on any kind of exchange program and any kind of education-related activity that comes out of the U.S. Embassy. Any of you who have questions about what it means to be an American diplomat, I'm happy to answer those questions perhaps at a later time. So I'm excited to be here and to speak with all of you. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Noyuri and I am working with Grace at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo in the Public Affairs section as the local hire at the embassy. I work with USJETAA and sometimes I try to visit some of those schools with the JET teachers who receive the microgrants. So I hope one day I will get to see you at your schools.
So this is Bahia Simons Lane. I'm the Executive Director of USJETAA. I was a JET program ALT in Gunma Prefecture from 2005 to 2007. And then I had a chance to work in as the advisor for the Compulsory Education Division of the Prefectural Board of Education, where I got to work with a lot of ALTs, not just JETs, but also non-JET ALTs and JTEs. I am now the Executive Director of USJETAA. It is a full-time position, and I'm very excited that I've been able to continue my involvement and support of JETS and JET alumni.
Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Neely. I work with Bahia at USJETAA. I'm the program coordinator for USJETAA. I was a JET program participant from 2013 to 2015 in Kumamoto as an ALT. For USJETAA, I manage a lot of the programs, especially the microgrant. I do a lot of the communications from that. So if you do apply, you'll definitely hear from me at some point. And I'm happy to be on this webinar and meet all of you.
Great, thank you all. So here's our agenda for today, what you can expect. We'll go over the basics of what the Microgrant Initiative is. We'll talk about eligibility. We'll talk more specifically about projects. We'll review the selection process and grant timeline, how to apply, and then we'll take questions at the end. So I encourage you to think about any questions you have about specific projects you're thinking of, or how we're selecting projects. Anything that we don't answer, please ask them at the end. All right, so first, what is the Microgrant Initiative? So this program provides small grants, micro grants, of about $200 to $1,000 to JET program teachers who are working in Japan. And this can fund any project that you would like to do in your school or community that will introduce American culture and English language. It is funded by the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo and then administered by us, USJETAA. And I'm going to also ask the panelists, if you want to jump in at any time, please feel free to add. And I will also ask you if there's anything that I want your feedback on. Okay, so eligibility. So you must be a United States citizen to apply to this program since it's being funded by the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. You must be a current JET participant on the JET program, but you don't need to be a teacher. You can be an ALT or a CIR or even an SEA, although we've never had one of those apply. And you may also have co-applicants and collaborators on your projects who do not need to be JETs and do not need to be US citizens. So for example, we have had projects in the past where an ALT applied, but they had their JTE as their co-applicant to do a project in their school. We've also had people partner with community groups and organizations as well. You must be able to carry out your proposed project, so please propose something that is reasonable in scope. And you must submit your interim and final reports by the specified deadlines. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the project, and this is where I think it'd be great if any of the other panelists wants to jump in at the end of the slide. But these projects should promote English language education. They should encourage travel and study in the United States or introduce some aspects of American culture. So some examples of the types of events we have had in the past are hosting a cultural event like a winter or like holiday party, sharing study abroad and scholarship information, starting a pen pal or video exchange, encouraging students to use English through improv or cooking, and creating physical resources by purchasing English books or videos, for example, creating a library in their school. So you can read about past projects on our website, and there's a summary up on our blog of all of them. But I would invite the other panelists, if they have any projects from the past few years that they really liked, to share them now.
I can talk about some of the past projects. I think some of the projects that I found very impressive were projects that combined several of these things, like a cultural event that showcased American culture, but also raised money for students to go abroad, for instance. Or one other project that I liked was someone who did a podcast in their school. So they had students, write down a script of something, some aspect of Japanese culture that they wanted to explain to people abroad. And then with the grant, they bought the equipment to record the podcast. And then they had students sort of practice working on their English and then record them. And then they played it over the PA for everyone in the school to hear. Those were some of the projects that I found were really great and engaged the students, but also like the community, and had like several of these aspects in them.
I'll chime in here.
To jump in.
Sorry, if I may, I'll also comment on something that Casey mentioned, and it's the idea of engaging with not only your students, but also with the local community. So I know that some of the examples are to purchase items, but really what we'd like to see with a lot of these grants is this interaction that you have as members of the community, as teachers, to do something. And so I think that's why we like the ideas of, yes, purchase equipment so that you can do a podcast, but the actual activity that you're doing is engaging with your students, working with the community, practicing English skills, and coming up with some kind of production of something. And we tend to really like the grants that are, the grant applications that have that sort of feel to it, because we want to make sure that we are reaching into our local audiences, whether it be students or the communities, with whatever activities we have. And at least from the embassy's perspective, what we really want to do is we want to talk about American values, American customs. We want to highlight the friendship between the United States and Japan. And I think for you as applicants to this microgrant projects, and as individuals who are out in the field working with your local communities, I think this is a really great way for us to reach your specific audiences in your specific areas.
Thank you, Grace. I would say, related to that, two of my favorite projects from the past year, one was the Black History Month Festival, which was a very large-scale community effort with, I believe, about 4 different events teaching about Black history in the United States, talking about cultural differences, and they were able to bring both students, community members, and members of the Black community in that region all together to essentially share and learn together. The other project I really liked was a cooking class series where cooking classes were conducted in English, facilitated by an American ALT. And she did 3 different cooking classes that featured different styles of food. And it was a really great experience for the community members to come together at these cooking classes and talk to the ALTs and learn how to make something in English. All right, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the timeline. The applications for this will be due by September 16th, 2019 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, which is September 17th, 12:59 p.m. Japan time. We will select the grantees and announce them in mid-October, and we will begin dispersing the funding in November of 2019. So your project should take place anytime between November 1st, 2019 and May 31st, 2020. We will ask on your application when you plan to start utilizing the funds, so please make sure to include that information. The interim reports, which is a check-in from us to know how things are going with your project, to find out if you need any extra help, make sure things are going well. Those will be due on March 1st, 2020. And your final report will be due 30 days after the completion of your project or by June 15th, 2020. So that's, if you complete your project, I don't know, at the beginning of December, your report will be due at the beginning of January, 30 days after. So you have about a month to prepare and write that report. Okay, so how to apply. So go to our website, usjetaa.org. Under the programs drop-down on the menu, you can select microgrants. It has all of the information that you need to complete the application. The main components that the application includes is your contact and JET info, any co-applicants you have, a project description and title, your audience, potential impact, and I would say that potential impact is something we pay a lot of attention to, so please think about the short-term and long-term impact of your project when you're writing your application. Your proposed project dates and your proposed grant amount and your proposed budget. Now, the amount you are awarded may vary from what you actually apply based on our knowledge working with past grantees, but please ask for as much as you need, as you think you will need, and the more complete your budget is, the more likely we will be able to award you that exact amount. The application and all of the components must be received by the deadline, and please contact us with any project changes that occur after the deadline. So even if we're still in the review process, if something comes up, you know there's going to be a change, just contact us and let us know. And then this year we have an FAQ on the website, which has a lot of really great information about the program and the project. So please check there first, but if you have any questions, let us know. One more thing, this year we've also provided a Word document you can download so that you can draft your application before submitting it, but you will need to submit it through a form on our website. So please keep that in mind. You can download that Word document at any time. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add about the application or anything I've just said? Okay, great. So we're pretty much about to go into the Q&A section. If you have any questions during this process or during your application process, or you want to know if we have any feedback on a specific idea or questions about your project, please contact us. You can email us at contact@usjetaa.org at any time. You can call us, although we are only available in the office, typically from 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. However, if you would like to set up a call at a different time, you can email us and let us know. We can set something up. And then this year we also have a group on Facebook that you can join if you want to talk to previous grantees and get information from them, ask them questions, and read about their projects. You can join it. So the easiest way is to go to the USJETAA Facebook page and then hit the group's link, and you'll see that group right there. All right, so now it's question time. I would really encourage you all to ask any questions. You can type them into the chat box or use the Q&A feature, and which should be displayed on your screen. You can click it and you can type in your questions. Now, we did have one question submitted previously by email, so we'll go ahead and start with that question while you think about if there's anything else you would like to ask. So the first question we have is, how do you know if a project is successful? Are there specific indicators, or do you look at the entirety of the project and make a determination afterwards? And I'm going to ask any of the panelists if they want to take this question. So from my perspective, I think it's a combination of the two. So I do think there are some specific indicators. So there are certain things that we're looking for in a successful project, like Grace said, that the elements of the purpose of the project. So is it sharing American culture? Are you engaging with the community? One of the other things we look at is whether there is a long-term impact. So it's great if you as the ALT are making relationships with members of your community, if you can potentially hold your project again in the future. those are things that we look at. But I think we also look at the entirety of the project as a whole. There's no just one factor that's going to make, ensure that your project is successful or not. So, afterwards we might look at whether you achieved the goals of your project that you said you would, what different things occurred throughout the course of the project, and whether it went well as a whole. So I think we're looking more for the impact. We expect that, especially for first-time grantees, there might be some hiccups along the way, and that's fine. We are available to provide help and assistance. So some struggles that previous grantees have experienced is, for example, securing a venue or getting buy-in from their contracting organization. So even with that, you can still have a very successful project. So please don't worry too much about everything going perfectly.
May I jump in?
Yes, please.
So one thing I would like to mention is sometimes contents and programs that JET teachers, CIRs are organizing are great, but sometimes promotion component could be missing. So when you all plan your programs and apply for microgrant, make sure you think about how you promote your programs and how you get the words out so that people in your community would know about your program and can participate so that you can get the best outcome. And you could include budget for like creating flyers or going to just convenience stores to make some flyers printed. So think about that as well as the main contents of your program.
And I'll just add to that to say, when you're doing your application, make sure that you put down those people that are the collaborators, those people that you've talked to, whether that's like the local library, the local community center that you'll be working with in terms of putting on your project, in terms of, getting advertisement out about your project. If you're working with your school, if you're working with several schools, make sure that you note that so that we can see that not only is the impact the people that are affected by the project, but the relationships that you're building in putting the project together and the people that you'll be working with, so in terms of thinking of the future, if you, are done with your contract or whatnot, maybe these organizations will still want to hold similar events in the future because you've worked with them in putting them on.
Thank you. So we have another question come in. So first, will this webinar be available to view afterwards? Yes, it will. We are recording it. We will share it with people who could not attend live. So if you want to share this with a collaborator, potential collaborator or something so that they get all the same information as you, please feel free. The other question from Monica was, could we use this grant to develop and organize an American English culture camp? And I would say, without any specifics, it seems like that type of thing fits under the scope of this grant. But as you work through the application, you'll see what types of questions we're asking, and you can go ahead and think about what the scope of that would be, how much funding you would need, how many students would it impact as you're working through that application. I want to take the final question that we received in advance, and then we will go to the remaining questions in the chat box. So question was, could you share some of the most successful projects, giving a synopsis of it, and any hurdles that had to be overcome? And I'm going to ask Casey to take this first, since I know she worked pretty closely with grantees who did experience some challenges.
Sure. So one project comes to mind right away. There was a poetry project. One grantee decided to have, worked at a high school and decided to have students write poetry, put together an anthology of the poetry, and then have a poetry reading in the local community. to share the poetry and have students read it out, and then also to involve the community in the project. One hurdle that they ran into was timeline. So the grant sort of encompasses 2 school years, and the school year changes in the middle of it. So this person had planned to have it, towards the end of the year. Things got really busy. Testing happened, and, the teachers that she was working with said, oh, I don't know if we can have it now. She was able to resolve it and sort of push the timeline back, worked with the same students, even though they were in different classes, but had it right before the end of the school year. And then was able to have it at the school and invite the community in. So that was something with timeline was the problem there. So we were able to work with her, and the way the grant is, it's very flexible. She let us know, right away that it wasn't going to happen when she put down with the timeline she put down, and then we were able to work with her to find a solution for that. So that's definitely something to think about if you're doing something in your school. When do you want to have it? Do you want to have it before the school year ends? And then, what's going on in your school? Is that even possible? Or do you want to have it, within the new school year? So that was one issue that she had. She also had an issue with venues. As Bahia mentioned before, she was originally going to have it at a community center that didn't work out with the students and everything, and so she ended up having it at the school, but she had to have those conversations later down the line. So that's something you definitely want to think about at the beginning. Where do you want your event to take place? Having those conversations now as you're planning and thinking about the grant, and if it's a venue that is not free, so she had it at her school, so it was free, but if it's not, you can include that in your the cost of the grant as well.
Great, thank you, Casey. We have a bunch of other questions coming in, so I would like to go to those. All right, so excuse me. One question from the chat is, in past experiences with technology-related projects, from tools such as Skype and other video chatting services to more informal ones, such as social media websites, would you recommend taking this route, or has it caused problems in the past? Currently, I'm exploring the possibility of some of my junior high students speaking in English with American students their age, not using Skype, but a game such as Fortnite or Minecraft. I already see this being a daunting task, but would you recommend anything to avoid if I take the technological route, or would you discourage it entirely? So the other panelists can feel free to weigh in, but one of the challenges that I see with a project like this is that many of the schools have been very concerned about privacy when it comes to their students. So for example, pen pal exchanges have been quite a popular project, but some schools will not allow the students to share any personal information with their pen pals whatsoever. And so I think for a technology-based project where you would try to have students speaking to each other, that privacy could be one of the big concerns that might make it difficult to get buy-in from your school. So I would recommend on that front, maybe if you have like a JTE you're planning to work with, talking to them about it first and trying to assess whether that's going to be a problem with your specific school or not. Casey, would you add anything?
Yeah, I mean, just your concern, that's definitely been an issue in the past, where someone got to the end of like the planning stages of the project and everyone sort of seemed on board with it, but then when they were trying to put it in place, they realized that, maybe their principal or something hadn't signed off on it, or maybe there was an issue that came up later where parents didn't want, personal information getting out and things like that. So it's definitely something to consider in doing those types of projects, making sure everyone's sort of on board with it beforehand.
Yeah, thank you. For the technology aspect itself, I'm not really sure. We haven't had any projects proposed exactly like that. So whether there would be this technology, like whether there'd be a barrier specifically related to the technology, I'm not really sure. It's going to depend on, you know, how you're setting up the project, if you're doing it through your school, what their internet access is like, students' access to computers, that type of thing. So just take all of that into account when you submit your proposal. And yeah, but I think privacy is going to be the biggest kind of hurdle you might run into with a project like that.
I'll just add, some of the pen pal exchanges and things that we've had have also run into sort of the timeline issue, just because the American and Japanese school years are on different timelines where, you know, maybe the Japanese year ended, but the American year is still going. And so it hasn't always sort of matched up. This might be a little bit more of a different situation just because it's digital, so you're not, you know, physically sending anything over or anything like that. But that's also something to keep in mind in terms of like having those sorts of conversations.
Okay, next question. Let's go to the Q&A questions. So is it okay if there is a small discrepancy between the requested items versus what is actually bought? For example, if I plan to create a library, so I budget for a certain book, but it ends up being out of stock, so I have to substitute it with a similar book. Yes, that is completely fine. When you are creating your budget proposal, just create it to the best of your ability. It is an estimate of what you think the expenses will be. Within the final grant amount that is awarded, you have some flexibility in terms of how to, you know, reallocate and shift that money, as long as it's all within the same scope of the purpose of the grant. So let's say you budget, I don't know, $100 to buy supplies, but the supplies actually end up costing $72. That's totally fine. You can then shift the remainder from that budgeted 100 to a different purpose within your project. All right, next question from the chat. I'm planning to recruit some JETs to help me run my proposed event, English Learning Through Board Games. And I was wondering if gift cards used to compensate the JETs for their time can be put into the budget. Yes, that is fine. We've had programs in the past where volunteers have been awarded honorariums for their participation. That is the same type of thing. That should be appropriate as long as they are a reasonable amount of money and not, you know, $500 each. All right, next question from the Q&A. Is it possible to apply for funding and then return it if we don't need it? I would like to expand an event by applying for funding for a venue outside of school, but I'm getting conflicting signals from different teachers about whether or not we should host at the school again. If we apply for or are granted that funding but do not use it, what should we do? Yes, you can apply for funding for something that you think you will need it for. And then if you do not need it for that purpose, you will have the option to reallocate it within your grant or return it to us. We have had that happen in the past. It's fine, although we do request that you, when you're thinking about your budget, you're estimating, you know, trying to estimate as accurately as possible. But we understand that things do happen. Sometimes it's better to use a different venue that might be cheaper or free, and you don't need the funding for that. But I would say that we don't want anyone to end up not completing the project as a whole and returning all of the funding. So I would say if you're looking for funding for a venue for an event, think about what else the grant is also funding, so that if you end up not needing it for that specific purpose, you can either reallocate some of it or only do a partial refund for funding that you did not need. All right, next question, which I think is our last question that I see coming in. So we'll probably wrap up after this unless anyone else has more questions. The question is, could the grant be awarded to people looking to fund scholarships, or is it more preferable that the money be awarded to projects? I would say that it can be used to fund scholarships, but it is preferred that it is going to a specific project. And as we evaluate the projects, we have a finite amount of funding available, and we will prioritize the projects that have the strongest applications. So the applications that fit best with the guidelines of the grant. So I encourage you, if you're thinking about something related to scholarships, we've had, for example, grantees in the past have done projects where they funded a festival, and the purpose of that festival was to raise money to fund a scholarship, for example. So something like that would be preferable, because you have the community coming together and interacting and learning about these scholarship opportunities, et cetera, rather than just paying to send one person to say the US. So yes, that's my answer. And then
just to add to that, we've also had projects where it was like an information session where they brought like members of the community and students together, where they talked about, what are the differences between what are different funding sources to go abroad, and what are scholarships, and that sort of thing. So you could also, maybe use some of the money for a scholarship, but also have it be informational and have there be a community aspect to it as well. And then, maybe bring in culture as well of what are things to consider if you're going to be studying abroad in America, for instance. So you can think about maybe starting from the scholarship point and expanding it out to include other things as well.
Do either of the U.S. Embassy representatives have anything to add in answer to any of these questions?
Hi, not to specifically to the last question, but when JETs are planning to organize something to promote study in the United States, the U.S. Embassy and U.S. Consulate throughout Japan have a lot of information, materials, and resources that we can give, either like brochures or flyers or some information materials, both in English and Japanese. So if you are seeking something, you can contact USJETAA, and they can contact us, and we can find a way to send you that type of material on top of what you can get with the microgrant.
Thank you, Noyori. So we had one more question come in. So this is, here's a question. For English camp projects, what kinds of oversight would be possible for things like children's safety? So I would say that is not something that we can assist with. So if you are thinking about doing something like an English camp, my recommendation would be to find a partner, whether it's a community organization, a JTE, or something that would be able to provide that type of oversight for your project. And another question, is there a preference for projects that are run through schools versus projects run through prefectural, such as AJET associations? Is one viewed as a more reliable application than the other? No, we have no preference. Regardless, we have funded individual JETs at individual schools. We have also funded representatives of AJET for specific projects conducted by AJET. Both are equally reliable in our eyes. We do not have a specific preference. We are more looking at the specifics of the project and what the impact of the project is, whether it fits the guidelines, the goals of sharing American culture and English with your community, how many people it impacts, both in the short term and the long term. So we don't have a preference. You can certainly apply on behalf of your AJET association or just for an individual project at your school. All right, I think it's time to wrap up. Are there any final thoughts from any of the panelists?
Sorry, it was me. We are very excited to see many ideas and creative ideas and projects. You're definitely more than welcome to look at the past events and programs on the USJETAA website, but don't limit yourself to those types of events and programs. And we will look forward to seeing many applications this year.
I'll just add, if you are thinking about something, doing something and you have questions, or you just want to talk through it, feel free to contact us with any questions that you have, and we can answer further questions, or as you're working through it, if you come up with things that you want to ask or advice or things like that, you know, feel free to reach out to us. Also, as Bahia mentioned before, join the group. It's a great resource. If you have problems, there's probably very likely that someone who has had that problem before and can help you out. All of our past micrograntees are on that Facebook group, so I would encourage you to join that and ask questions there as well.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to say thank you all for your interest. We are very excited about running this grant program again for another year. I've been very impressed over the past few years at the quality of the projects that we have had. I wish that we could fund everybody that applies, but we can't. So please, as you're working through your application, just think about the project as clearly as you can, and work hard on your application. And if you are not sure whether something is appropriate to apply for, feel free to reach out to us before submitting your application. We can let you know whether that's a viable option or not. All right, thank you everybody. We did record this webinar. We'll share it within the, maybe not until next week, but we will share it out for people who could not attend. Feel free to send us any emails, questions that you have, check out the FAQ and download the application. I look forward to seeing all of your applications coming through in the next few weeks. Thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of your evening. And also, thank you to Grace and Noyori from the Embassy for being with USJETAA today on this webinar. And thank you for your support of this project. Good night, everybody.